She was screaming bloody murder, sloshing through the backyard in a soaked nightgown, flailing like she was being chased by a swamp monster. Which, to be fair, is kind of what sewage looks like under moonlight. Freeze frame, yep, that's Karen, and that horrifying splash zone she's swimming through? That used to be my swimming pool. You're probably wondering how we got here, and why on God's green earth she's covered in what I sincerely hope is just wastewater. Well, buckle up, neighbor. I moved into Willow Ridge for the peace. That was the sales pitch, at least, the oasis away from city chaos. Tucked behind a whisper, quiet tree line with winding streets, coffee-colored fences, and a community newsletter so proud of its cul-de-sac harmony it read like suburban scripture. My house was the fixer-upper at the end of Hollow Bend Lane, tucked just far enough off the street to be ignored, and shaded by 2 ancient oaks that dropped enough leaves to scare any HOA president into a nervous breakdown. But what sold me, above all else, was the pool, kidney-shaped, sparkling blue, framed by hand-cut stone and shaded just enough in the afternoon to make July feel like a resort. My own private Eden, no beach traffic, no public showers. Just me, a floaty shaped like a donut, and an uninterrupted view of the sky. For 3 weeks, life was perfect. I'd wake up at 6, work remote until 3, then slide into that cool chlorine bath with a cold drink and no shirt. The neighbors kept to themselves. There were the Chapmans, the Rodriguez, and one lady named Martha who walked her miniature schnauzer in pearls. Everyone smiled, waved, minded their business, except her, Karen Murchison. HOA president, daily power walker, owner of 3 identical sun hats and a whistle she blew at kids for riding scooters too fast. I should have known the minute she introduced herself with a clipboard and not a handshake that peace had a price tag. Just making sure you've read the HOA compliance packet, she'd chirped that first Monday. We take pride in our standards here. I told her I hadn't, but it didn't matter because it wouldn't have said anything about a grown woman sneaking into my backyard like a chlorinated raccoon. The first sign was wet footprints, not just a few, a full trail, starting near the back gate and ending at my deck, still damp at 7 a.m. I figured it was a deer. Or maybe a kid from the next street over. No big deal, I set up a motion light. 2 nights later, I found a pool noodle floating where it hadn't been and a half-empty can of peach White Claw resting on my diving rock. I don't drink White Claw, not peach, not anything. The next morning, my skimmer net had been moved. The floaty was relocated. My paranoia had company now, so I bought a camera. Nothing crazy, just a cheap trail cam with night vision strapped to a post by the back fence. I set it, forgot it, and 2 nights later my jaw hit the damn floor. There she was, Karen. Hair in a bun, pink swim cap on, slipping through my side gate at 12:43 a.m. like she was late for synchronized swimming practice. She waltzed in with a towel under one arm and what looked like a Bluetooth speaker in the other. I watched her cannonball into my pool like she owned the deed. Watched her do backstrokes while sipping White Claw and humming along to some jazz pop nonsense I couldn't place. I watched her towel off, blow a kiss to my motion light, and slip back out into the night like a chlorinated cat burglar. I should have called the cops. I didn't. I confronted her. The next morning, 7:00 a.m., sharp, she was pacing past my driveway with that same clipboard. "Morning," I called. Calm, but firm. "Did you enjoy your swim?" Her smile froze mid-pucker. "Excuse me? Last night, my pool, you, the swim cap, peach White Claw?" I held up my phone. Her eyes narrowed. "I don't appreciate whatever insinuation you're making, Mr. Hayes. And if you've installed unauthorized surveillance, I'm afraid that's a violation of our privacy ordinances." I blinked. "On my own property? There are visibility thresholds. I'd suggest reviewing your HOA packet." I stood there stunned, while she turned on her heel and strutted off like she'd just won a court case. That same afternoon, I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my door. Improper fencing material, non-approved deck stain color, excessive nighttime lighting. All filed and signed by President K. Murchison. 3 violations in 24 hours. Like clockwork. I tried diplomacy. I really did. I emailed her, called, left a voicemail. Even tried dropping by her house to talk things out. Her husband, Barry, answered the door in socks and apologized before shutting it in my face. The next day, another violation: unregistered flotation devices. Apparently, the donut ring was aesthetically disruptive to the aquatic tone of the neighborhood. I didn't even know water had tones. That week, I stopped seeing Karen on her walks. But the fines kept coming, and the pool kept being used. I'd find fresh wet footprints every other morning, always just dry enough to deny, just obvious enough to enrage. My camera started glitching, suspiciously around the hours of midnight to 2 a.m. A neighbor told me Karen had mentioned personalizing neighborhood policy around irresponsible aquatic behavior. I asked what the hell that meant. The neighbor shrugged and offered a bundt cake. Then came the letter. A notice of emergency board review. Karen had called a special HOA meeting. Topic: non-compliant aquatic infrastructure and potential decommissioning for community wellness. Translation: she wanted my pool gone, permanently. Claimed it violated the natural aesthetic of Willow Ridge, that it encouraged unauthorized use by underage residents, and posed a threat to neighborhood tranquility. The meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. Thursday. By the time I showed up, folder in hand, copies of trail cam footage printed out like legal evidence, the room was already packed with Karen's loyalists. A few were sipping from HOA logo water bottles. A PowerPoint was projected onto a screen behind her podium. Slide 1. The pool problem. I didn't get to speak. Not until the very end. Karen ran the meeting like a court trial, complete with doctored photos of teenagers near a pool, not mine, pie charts of made-up noise complaints, and even a guest speaker, a retired lifeguard who talked for 10 minutes about how unsupervised water features led to psychic unease in a neighborhood. I raised my hand, waited. Karen never called on me. I finally stood and said, "Can I respond?" Karen adjusted her mic. "We don't allow disruptions, Mr. Hayes. You'll have your chance during the open comment section." When that came, she cut the mic after 60 seconds. My 60 seconds. I showed the footage anyway, held up my laptop, turned it around to display Karen's midnight backstroke. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed. Karen didn't flinch. "Fabricated," she said. "Photoshop, deepfake, anyone can fake footage these days." The board voted to investigate options for pool compliance removal. Motion passed 3-2. Karen smirked as the crowd filtered out. I stood alone in the back, still holding my laptop like a useless shield. The war had started, not with chlorine, not with floaties, but with power, denial, and one hell of a midnight splash. The first fine was for aquatic debris. That's the phrase Karen used in the official notice, typed in bold Times New Roman on HOA letterhead and hand-delivered in an envelope that reeked of lavender potpourri. Inside was a photo, zoomed in and grainy, of exactly 3 leaves floating on the shallow end of my pool. Not a branch, not a cluster, just 3 individual leaves that looked like they'd been plucked and placed there with surgical precision. The violation read, "Failure to maintain sanitary aquatic surfaces in accordance with Section 9.3 of the Willow Ridge Clean Water Mandate. A $250 fine payable within 10 days, or it would double." The next day, another envelope. This time, it was fence inconsistency, citing a half-inch color mismatch on the backside of my pool gate, something only visible if you were inside the yard and pressing your nose against the wood. I hadn't painted that section, the previous owner had. But Karen's documentation included a swatch comparison from the approved HOA fence palette, noting that Cedar Smoke 4 had been used where Twilight Cedar 2 was required. Another $150. No warning, just punishment. That weekend, I tried catching her in the act. I sat outside with a flashlight and coffee until almost 3 a.m. Nothing. But Monday morning, the diving ring was wet again, and someone had left an empty bottle of red wine perched on my pool skimmer lid like it was a romantic offering. I checked the trail cam, static. Full-on digital snow between midnight and 2. When the feed resumed, the pool was calm and quiet, like nothing had happened. I replaced the SD card and noticed the camera had been physically tilted. Just enough to miss the entrance, just enough to catch nothing. Karen was getting smarter, slipperier, and the fines were coming faster now. Algae hazard. Unauthorized lighting after dark. Non-regulation pool float. She cited the inflatable donut again, even though I'd tossed it in the garage 2 weeks ago. She claimed it was visible through the fence slats, causing visual clutter for pedestrians. I live at the end of a cul-de-sac. No one walks past my fence unless they're trying to. And Karen always tried. Then came the notice about community safety. A printed letter this time, co-signed by 2 other board members. Dale from the corner house with the vintage Mustang he never drove, and Linda, who once threatened to call animal control because a butterfly garden encouraged stinging insects. The letter explained, in legal-sounding language, that the HOA board had voted to explore options for pool mitigation. The word removal was used. So was liability. They claimed that my pool presented significant risk to neighborhood children and property values, despite having a locked gate, a privacy fence, and more security signage than a small airport. I called the county. The inspector came, took one look at the place and said, "You're cleaner than most hotels." He even complimented the chlorine levels. I asked him to put it in writing. He did. I scanned it, printed 5 copies and taped one to my mailbox. 2 days later, it was gone. In its place was another HOA letter, this time accusing me of posting unauthorized public documentation. Karen had circled the line in red ink and written, "I not propriet for community standards," in the margin. I'd had enough. I went inside, opened my desktop folder titled HOA Nonsense, and started building a case. I had months of evidence. Dozens of time-stamped photos showing Karen's footprints leading from the gate. Water drips on the path, that single wine bottle. I even had a blurry image captured before the camera tilt of a figure mid-cannonball in a pink swim cap, the same one Karen wore during her neighborhood morning walks. I printed the images and added them to a binder, 1 page per incident, labeled, cross-referenced. Then I started knocking on doors. It began with the Thompsons. Their 12-year-old had been fined for inappropriate sprinkler use because he ran through their lawn system shirtless. Karen said it invited an atmosphere of public nudity. The Thompsons were furious but afraid to speak out. The week after they protested, they received a citation for excessive trampoline noise. They don't own a trampoline. Then I met Harold and June, the retired couple 2 streets over. They got fined for obstructive planting because their hydrangeas grew 3 inches over the sidewalk. The fine arrived the same week Karen installed her own hydrangea bush, which encroached at least 6. She had a full gardening exemption, of course, approved by the board. She is the board, or at least she was. I gathered 7 stories like that, printed them, highlighted dates and inconsistencies, created a spreadsheet. I was no longer just documenting pettiness. I was building a war chest, and the piece de résistance? I found a neighbor, Susan, recently divorced, 2 teenagers, who caught Karen on her Ring camera hopping the fence into my yard at 1:17 a.m. towel in hand, wine bottle visible. Hair wrapped in the same pink swim cap I'd seen before. When she exited 24 minutes later, she was carrying a floaty, the donut. She put it in her car and drove off. Susan had never shown the footage to anyone. "I didn't want to get involved," she said. But after she called CPS on me for having a broken porch light, I figured maybe it's time. I digitized the video, backed it up 6 times, and stored a copy in the cloud under a fake folder name called Taxes 2022. Then I mailed a flash drive to myself in a sealed envelope. Chain of custody, just in case. I thought about confronting Karen, marching up to her door with a manila folder and a moral backbone. But that's not how you win a war in Willow Ridge. Karen didn't fear confrontation, she feared consequences. The kind that came with paperwork, with witnesses, with public humiliation. But most of all, she feared being outmaneuvered, and that's when I remembered something. An old plumbing schematic I found in the garage when I moved in. It had been taped to the breaker box, brittle and yellowed. A previous owner had drawn it up in pencil. Utility lines, drain paths, stormwater systems. There was a pipe marked, Old Sewer, capped. It ran parallel to my property, right beneath the pool. And according to the map, it connected to a valve housing that sat directly under what used to be a maintenance easement. one that now backed up, poetically, into the slope behind Karen's hydrangeas. I dusted off the diagram, made copies, and called in a favor from a guy I used to work with in municipal water. Hypothetically, I asked him, if I were to redirect a flow into a cap storm line, and that line just so happened to be, say, still semi-operational, what would happen? He looked at me, smiled slowly. Depends how much pressure you use, and how deep you want the splash. That night, as Karen prepared to call another emergency board meeting about community health violations and unauthorized aquatic gatherings, I began planning something bigger. Something wetter. Something she'd never see coming, not even through the slats of my unapproved fence, because paperwork was one thing, but poetic justice? That's personal. The thing Karen never figured out, despite her clipboard, her bylaws, her obsession with fence slat angles, is that I didn't just move to Willow Ridge to relax, I moved here to retire. And I didn't retire from accounting or teaching or the military. I retired from the one career that gives you godlike power over an entire neighborhood's dirty little secrets. I was a municipal waste systems engineer for 22 years. My job wasn't glamorous, but I knew every inch of underground piping this county ever signed off on. Storm lines, sewer caps, overflow drains, backflow preventers. I designed half of them, inspected the other half, and knew the smell of a faulty gasket the way sommeliers know Cabernet. I was the kind of guy they called when things got ugly and brown in places they shouldn't, and when I bought this house, I made it a habit, like brushing my teeth, to look over all historical schematics. Not because I needed to, but because it's just who I am. And when Karen declared war on my pool, that little voice in my head, the same one that used to guide emergency crews through waist-deep backup, whispered, "Why play defense when you control the plumbing?" It started with a crawlspace inspection. My foundation is old, and beneath it runs a trench line that used to serve the now-defunct Willow Ridge Nursery School, a long raised building where they'd teach preschoolers and hose off sandboxes with city water. The line was capped in '98, abandoned after the zoning changed. Most people forgot it existed. But I didn't. I'd seen it on a diagram so old it had coffee stains from a clerk who retired before I2K. The cap sat 2 feet under my gravel path, about 20 feet from the shallow end of my pool. I waited until the board meeting scheduled to vote on emergency pool removal was in session across town. I didn't go. I was in overalls, headlamp strapped on, spade in hand. 2 hours later, I hit metal. The cap, still sealed, still intact. Still connected to the city's backup stormwater grid, technically unused, but still legal for gray water disposal under the right circumstances. I called an old friend at the department. Asked if there were any permits for secondary flow usage near Hollow Bend. "Nope," he said. "That area's quiet. You'd need a junction permit if you wanted to drain into it, but nobody does. Too deep." "What if someone wanted to push water into it?" I asked. "You could, I guess," he said. "If you had a pressure gate." "Why?" "Just hypothetically." "Well, then, hypothetically, you'd be moving waste into the storm buffer zone, which isn't illegal as long as it's chemically balanced." "Hypothetically." "Good to know." I hung up and got to work. The next few nights were a fever dream of revenge-fueled engineering. I ordered parts under fake labels, PVC elbows, a backflow preventer, a reinforced gate valve. I rigged it all underground, no deeper than a dog might dig, and connected the system to my irrigation runoff. But instead of directing water out of the pool, I reversed the pressure. With the flip of a lever in my crawlspace, I could push non-potable water back through the system and let it fill the pool slowly, imperceptibly, between midnight and 5 a.m. And that's exactly what I did. I filled my pool not with fresh hose water, not with rain catch, but with reclaimed wastewater, a gray, slightly off-green cocktail treated just enough to be legal for agricultural drainage. It wasn't raw sewage. Let's not be monsters. But it was unpleasant. Smelled like algae had a midlife crisis. Had a faint shimmer, the kind you see on puddles outside gas stations. But it passed code. I even tested it myself. Chlorine levels, tolerable. Bacteria, minimal. Legality, rock solid. A pool inspector couldn't find me if they tried. But your average pool trespasser wouldn't know the difference between pool shock and diluted ditch water. especially if they were too arrogant to believe they were being tricked. On night 1, the pool shimmered strangely under the moon. On night 2, the smell began to settle in, a musty note of stale fish and rusted metal. On night 3, I noticed the water had developed a subtle film that clung to the surface when disturbed. And by night 4, I'd added one final touch: a dash of phosphorus-based pool dye, harmless to skin but prone to clinging to fabrics and hair, especially blonde hair, and turning them a gentle shade of swampy green under UV light. That night, the moon was full. I watched from the crawlspace monitor, a second camera hidden behind the ivy trellis. At 12:42 a.m., the gate opened. Same pattern, same towel, same cap. Karen Murchison, Willow Ridge Tyrant, tiptoed into my yard like it was her private resort. She carried her speaker again, this time playing something jazzy and French. La vie en rose, I think. She set down her wine glass, adjusted her robe, and lowered herself into the pool with a smug little splash. She stayed there, swam, floated, did leg kicks against the sidewall. I watched her do a full lap, drink in hand, swirling through what she thought was her chlorinated escape, but even from the camera I could see her nose wrinkle. The pause as she sniffed, the hesitation. She dipped her fingers into the water and held them up to her face, sniffed again, wiped her cheek, then dunked one more time for good measure. Maybe she thought it was just bad pool maintenance. Or maybe her wine had numbed the part of her brain responsible for logic. She stayed another 15 minutes, long enough for the dye to sink into her hair. Long enough for her to exit, towel off, and slip back through the gate with that same sloshed confidence she always carried. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly anticipate, is that Susan from next door had just installed a new Ring camera, high definition, with a motion-activated spotlight. And Susan, bless her sleepless soul, got the whole thing. Every splash, every backstroke, every tipsy karaoke line she sang into a pool noodle like it was a microphone. The next morning Susan sent it to me. "Figured you'd want this," she said, smirking behind her coffee. "Also, should I be concerned the water is glowing?" "It's just agricultural dye," I said. "Completely legal." I uploaded the video to a private file, then to a burner TikTok, captioned it, "When HOA Karen forgets she's not in a Marriott." The internet did the rest. It took 12 hours to hit 400 views. By the next morning, it had been stitched, duetted, analyzed frame by suburban drama accounts, and turned into at least 3 remixes. One of them auto-tuned her voice into a synth-pop breakdown. Another added dramatic slow-mo as she lifted the wine glass, green-tinted water cascading around her like she was auditioning for Swamp Nymph, the musical. Karen denied everything at first. Claimed it wasn't her, that the video was AI-generated, deep-faked, that the voice didn't match, but the wine glass had a personalized K engraved on it. And by day 3, the dye had done its job. Her platinum bob had taken on a faint, moldy lime hue that not even 3 trips to the salon could strip out. She wore hats for a week, then scarves, then sunglasses, the size of car windshields. But it didn't matter. Everyone knew. The HOA subreddit picked it up. So did 2 Facebook meme pages. Even the local news ran a mystery swimmer segment during their lighter side of the news roundup. They blurred her face, but every neighbor knew. Everyone in Willow Ridge knew. Her reign wasn't over yet, but it was dented, humiliated, chlorinated, and now, finally, on the defensive. All I had to do now was wait for the rest of her little empire to crumble, because when the water turns, it doesn't just splash, it seeps. Karen did what Karens always do when they get caught. She doubled down, then lawyered up. 2 days after her swamp ballet hit 1 million views and was remixed into a dubstep anthem titled Pool of Lies, I got a certified letter. Karen Murchison, in all her chlorine-stained glory, was officially suing me for character defamation, unlawful surveillance, emotional distress, and non-compliant water coloration in a shared residential district. She claimed I'd lured her into a chemical hazard, claimed the pool was weaponized, claimed I'd doctored the footage and poisoned her hair on purpose. The letter even accused me of psychological warfare using TikTok. I laughed so hard I choked on my coffee. My lawyer, Janet, laughed harder. Let her try, she said between sips. We'll file a motion to dismiss so fast she'll need a neck brace. Karen's lawyer clearly hadn't done his homework. Because what none of them realized, not the board, not the HOA committee, not even her attorney, is that I'd been documenting everything since the first soggy footprint, every fine, every forged violation, every midnight dip, every instance of HOA funds being redirected toward emergency pool inspections, which were really just line items covering up Karen's little moonlight parties. I had financial records showing that over 400 of HOA funds had been used in the past 6 months to reimburse Karen for supposed safety audits. Audits that, when cross-referenced with my footage, matched up perfectly with our late-night aquatic romps. I presented all of it, neatly compiled, tabbed, and time-stamped at the next open HOA board meeting. It was standing room only. Half the neighborhood showed up, some in lawn chairs, a few brought popcorn. The whole front row was just Susan and the Thompsons and that guy with the drone who films real estate walkthroughs, all holding their phones like it was court TV. Karen came in late, hat on, sunglasses covering half her face. She walked like someone who expected to be applauded for surviving humiliation, not confronted by it. When she saw me at the podium, her smile dropped faster than the chlorine levels in my pool. Before we begin, I said, I'd like to submit Exhibit A through Q. The board shuffled through the stack. They flipped through pages showing Karen in mid-dive, Karen sipping wine on my floaty, Karen charging the HOA account for a chemical safety analysis conducted the same night she left a trail of footprints to my cabana. Dale, the guy with the Mustang, was the first to speak. Wait a damn minute, he muttered. She used money to sneak into his pool, Linda gasped. We reimbursed her 3 times for after-hours inspections? One of the board secretaries pulled up the ledger. That's where the reserve money went. We were short last quarter because of this. Karen tried to interrupt. That footage was unauthorized. You can't. No, we can, I said. Every clip was captured on private property using legally installed surveillance, and here's the cherry on top. I pulled up a notarized statement from Susan affirming Karen's trespasses. Then another from the Rodriguezes, who caught her in their pool last August while they were on vacation. She's been doing this all over the neighborhood, I said. Not just to me. She's been water hopping like a drunk synchronized swimmer with a god complex. The crowd exploded. Someone yelled, "Check her for fins." Dale stood up and turned toward Karen. Is this true? You've been using people's pools without permission? Karen tried to regain control. This is character assassination. None of this proves intent. Intent? I said, raising a brow. Karen, I caught you swimming in my pool 6 times. You billed the HOA for inspections. You wrote fake violations to cover your tracks. And when I made the water less pleasant, you still went in. Linda stood. Motion to suspend President Murchison pending investigation. Dale seconded it. Hands flew up, unanimous. They stripped her of her presidency in 30 seconds flat. Her husband Barry didn't even stand up for her. He just stared at his lap like he was trying to disappear into the linoleum. Karen stood there, stunned. No one clapped, no one said a word, even the drone guy stopped filming out of sympathy. Her kingdom had collapsed. The next week, Dale called an emergency vote to dissolve the HOA. He said something about returning control to the community, but really, we all knew, no one wanted to touch that dumpster fire with a 10-foot pool skimmer. The vote passed. Willow Ridge was now a self-governed neighborhood, free of inspections, fines, and bylaws about the molecular hue of deck stain. I celebrated the way I knew best. First, I drained the pool fully, flushed the dye, flushed the gray water, replaced the lining, shocked it twice. Then I refilled it with pure, clean water straight from the tap and triple filtered it just for fun. I added a floating thermometer that looks like a duck, installed 2 new cameras, and hung a sign, printed in all caps with a Gothic serif font that screamed absolutely not today, Satan. It read, "Private property. No Karens allowed." Then I built a little perch along the pool fence for Cluck Norris. He's a rescue rooster. Found him at a feed store closing sale. He's loud, ugly, and mean to trespassers. Perfect HOA material, really. He watches over the yard like a feathery sentinel, crows at anyone who walks too close to the gate. Karen tried once, out of habit. just stood at the sidewalk with a clipboard like she was still in power. Cluck Norris shrieked so loud she nearly dropped her Yeti tumbler. She hasn't been back since. The final touch, the real poetry, wasn't the sign or the rooster or the fresh chlorine. It was what I did with the capped line, the one under my pool. See, I never sealed it. I just reversed it again, rerouted the overflow. Legally, it still qualifies as a pressure relief line for storm management. But now, instead of draining back into the system, it has a new outflow direction. Karen's property sits downhill from mine. Gravity's a beautiful thing, especially when her backyard suddenly becomes unusually soft after a heavy rain. I watched it happen once, just a trickle at first, then a seep. Then the unmistakable scent of nutrient-rich runoff pooling beneath her hydrangeas. She called the county. They said it was a natural drainage phenomenon, something about improper landscaping. Nothing to do with me. I was just sitting on my patio that day, sipping black coffee and watching the water glisten in my newly purified oasis. Cluck Norris crowed, a lawn chair creaked. Somewhere in the distance, a sprinkler sputtered out a rhythm like slow applause, and I smiled, because in the end, Karen got what she always wanted, a water feature of her very own. She just never expected it to smell like karma.